Can't You Hear Them by my mother to raise awareness for suicide. Their blood crying from the ground, the screams bellowing from my mother's soul. Or are you too busy to hear? Too busy pursuing what the world has to offer, that our children dying at an early age is normal in our society. Maybe because of the kid next door. But don't be deceived. Death is closer than you can perceive. Can't you hear them crying out for help, crying out to break free, crying out for someone to notice the pain they're in? It's just another sound in this busy world, but listen closer. Sometimes in their silence, they are saying so much more. But you didn't notice the subtle clues, the isolation, the different clothing, the bad grades. Can't you hear them when they try to tell you something, but you pushed them away because your favorite show was on? Can't you hear them? Their eyes have a story to tell, but you're too busy entertaining your new man. I guess you finally heard them when they silenced their pain and ended it all. Can you hear them now? Because I
can. Good afternoon, everybody. I hope all is well in your world today. I'd like to welcome you to Itsy Bitsy Bookworms Radio. We're all about the kids. Yes, we're all about the babies here. So what I'd like for you to do, my regular listeners, you know what we do every Sunday. Go grab a pen and piece of paper because there's going to be information that I know you can use. And for listeners just tuning in for the first time, this is what we do. I suggest you grab a pencil, pen, and some paper because there's going to be information that I know that you can use. I am Pamela Hornsby Irvin, author, educator, entrepreneur, and motivational speaker. I will be your host today for the next hour. So without further ado, I would like to introduce my guest for today, Marion McCord, founder, director of CHADD, Coalition for Mental Health. Good afternoon, Marion. How are you?
I'm good. Good afternoon to you and to all the listeners.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'd like just to say that it is totally my honor to have you as a guest today, speaking on such prevalent subject matter as I'm sure all of our listeners have seen in the news, where the designer Kate Spade and the food critic Anthony Bourdain committed suicide, and both left behind children. And an extended family member at the age of 15 went to his funeral a couple of weeks ago, committed suicide. He hung himself at the age of 15. And it left me in a state of uncertainty and question as to what could cause and what reason would a 15-year-old have to commit suicide. What's, really going on in the minds of parents who commit suicide that leave children behind. So first and foremost, I'd like for you to explain to us what CHADD means.
CHADD is an acronym for Communities Healing Adolescent Depression and Suicide, and it's actually named in honor of my son, Chad, who took his life when he was 18.
Wow, I'm sorry to hear that, because I think that, it's something that you just never can get over. Death in itself is hard to come to grips with, but then when someone takes his or her own life via suicide, it's even more confusing and it's harder to get through. So I'm going to tell my listeners that today it's going to be a hard show to get through, but we'll make it through.
Right. Yeah.
So, Miriam, what can kids do to feel better when they're feeling down or depressed?
Well, I think it's really important that number one, they're aware of their feelings, and if they are feeling down, that they talk to someone. And I'm not saying you have to rush out and talk to a therapist, but talk to someone who you feel safe with, whether that be a parent, an older relative, a teacher, even starting with a friend, because we know that when kids are in distress, the first people they turn to is their peer. Talking about those feelings and let someone try to help you sort through them, or direct you to trying to get more support.
So, Marion, are depression and or suicidal thoughts inherited? Where do these thoughts come from, if you have the answer?
That's a good question. We know that some of those that die by suicide do have mental illness. There's some estimates that as high as 90% of people that have died by suicide have a diagnosable mental illness. Granted, they may not have been diagnosed, because that's part of a huge problem. There's often kids or adults have a mental illness and they're not even aware of it. So yes, and those illnesses, just like other medical illnesses such as heart disease or certain kinds of cancer or sickle cell or diabetes, they are inheritable in that we do pass these genes on down to our biological children. But we also know that suicide is a very complicated thing. There's usually never one thing that we can say it was because they had a mental illness or because they had that. There's usually, if you kind of think of it as a perfect storm, that certain things happened at the same time or the wrong time that resulted in a suicide. Maybe there was a history of mental illness. Maybe there was a trauma. Maybe there was a loss. Maybe there was a reaction to a medication. So there's often different factors in that person's life that can result in a suicide.
So should the entire family seek counseling if a child is suicidal?
I would say that would be a good thing. It is very difficult for a family when someone, one of their children, they find out is suicidal. I think all of us, when we gave birth to those children, that was the furthest thing from our mind, that little, precious little child would one day want to make the decision to end their life, and that's not normal. So I think it's important that when this happens in a family, if the suicide attempt has happened, or if that child told the parent, or a child told a friend, and the friend told the parents, it's pretty much one of the last things you ever want to hear come out of your child's mouth. And it's very difficult in terms of what do I do with that information. And when we go to school, we don't learn how to support someone who's suicidal. So I recommend that the families seek help, if it's not counseling, or resources in terms of how can I best support this child with these struggles. Because, again, I think so many of us don't understand suicide or even depression or that thought process that my life is so bad, the only option that I have and the best option would be to end my life. And that, therefore, we sometimes say the wrong things. Maybe we might blow it off. We might do the shame and blame game with our kids. We may lack empathy in that I don't really understand what you're going through, and I'm going to judge you for what you're going through. In other words, it's, life can be hard, but you know what? You just got to try a little bit harder. Or you got to just put the smile on your face and think about the good things. But when someone is in the midst of a crisis, may have some depression, may have another mental illness such as bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, some of those things that we say thinking we're going to help that person could be some of the last things that person needs to know. So I just encourage them to really learn about what's going on so that you can learn to be a healthy part of their support system. Because any child that is having these thoughts needs to have a strong support system in place. And even for families who get it, I always said, I felt like I sort of got it. I was a pediatric nurse when my son was going through these challenges. And I knew how to treat a sick and dying child, and I knew my child was sick. And I knew it wasn't his fault. But I will say, I was not prepared to carry this heavy load. And so I know personally myself, I took counseling because I wanted to be the best that I could be, so I could be the best that I could be for my child. So yes, I think it would be great for a family with a suicidal child to seek counseling, to seek education, to seek support. You're going to need it. And like I said, you want to do the best that you can to support your child.
So that kind of answers the question, what can parents do if worried that their child is suicidal? So if you're worried, the least bit, you should go to therapy or at least find someone who is a mental health professional and talk to them, maybe take the child there too as well.
Right. And I think even before you get to that point, to address the question, what should I do if I'm worried about my child? It starts with that conversation at home. And often when people are struggling with suicidal thoughts, they are sometimes just waiting for an invitation or somebody or someone to try to help them, to try to somehow connect or realize how much they are hurting. And so when we tell people that when you are worried about your child, and as hard as it is, you need to ask them that question. Are you having thoughts of suicide? Or are you thinking about taking your life? Because too often people think, oh my God, if I ask them that question, that might just give them an idea. That's what they should do. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the major myths or misunderstanding is these people have been thinking about it for a long time before you ask that question. So, having a safe conversation, again, it's not about shame and blame. You're trying to really understand where are they coming from, having that conversation in terms of, how are things going at school? How are things going with your friends? Or I've noticed you've changed. I've noticed, and say those behaviors, because mental illness or depression will manifest itself in our behaviors. So call them on it. Tell them what you've noticed is different, because often they're in it, in the thick of it, and they don't even realize they've changed. Or again, with their distorted thinking, they can't rationalize their behaviors or think of a good way out of this, because with the distortion, their answer is, there is no good solution. I have no hope. I'm worthless. It's hopeless. Nobody's ever going to be able to fix me. And I'm bringing this world down. I'm a burden. So they have lost the ability to see that hope. Even though they might be the brightest and the best student in that class, they've lost hope. They've lost that self-esteem. They lost the ability to see goodness within themselves. I like to describe depression to kids or to parents. If you can just imagine a thick black veil goes down in front of their face, and when they look out into the world, everything seems very dark. They don't have the ability to see hope. And that same reflection, when they look at themselves, they lose the ability to see the goodness within themselves. And parents, can talk to their child with the blue in their face, how good they are. But often they lose that ability to see that goodness because I can only see the bad. And so many people strive for perfection, are the perfectionists, or they have tunnel vision. They set the bar very high. And anything that they fall short of meeting that bar, their distorted thinking is total failure. And it just begins to eat away at who they are.
Wow. So, I was going to make mention to the listeners, hey, love up on your children as best you can and give them the attention. And because we talk a lot, Marion, about parents and grandparents and caregivers of children to observe the child, pay attention to the child for various reasons. And, is that not completely, because I want to make sure that I'm hearing you correctly, even if you tell your children they are loved, that I love you, and, the world would be, I'd be lost without you, and all those positive reinforcements are somehow not enough when you're dealing with a child that may have suicidal thoughts?
That's right. Because, again, I think our kids, they sense that love, and they also want to please us. And when they sometimes make bad decisions that sometimes, and let's use drinking, for example. Maybe I'm drinking and, oh, my God, my parents have been telling me I shouldn't be doing that, but I did it, and then I did something really stupid, and, oh, my gosh, I'm just such an embarrassment, to my parents, that burdensome. And, that just is another, they get caught up in that illness sometimes, especially if they're making wrong choices, and they're going down the wrong road, and even though their parents have told them how much they love them, that sometimes these thought processes are so strong, and it gets such a grip on their brain.
Wow.
And also, I think it's important to know, too, that what you said in terms of knowing your kids, watching them, loving on them, is very, very, very important. But also knowing, too, that our kids, that they just want to be like other kids. And they will try to mask, what's going on. They'll try to pretend they got their stuff together because they just want to be like other kids. Even my own son, he took his life when he was in high school, but he had shared that he had been thinking about taking his life since he was in third grade. But yet again, he died. Third grade.
I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but I just have to place emphasis on that because I didn't want my listeners to miss that. Okay? At third grade, what is that? That's 8 years old? 9? Oh, my goodness.
8 or 9, yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
And, but he was, and when he died by suicide, he went to a school of 2,100 students. And they said if we would have to pick a student that we thought would die by suicide, we would have picked your son last. Because he was a master of disguise. He had a ton of friends. He was popular. He was smart. He was the poster child of success on the outside. That gave him the ability to hide his wounds that he had on the inside until his illness got too big and too bad that he could no longer hide behind that mask. So that's an important piece, is just knowing that often our kids are going to do their best to hide it. Or if they start thinking about suicide, If they tell anybody, they're probably going to tell a friend. And then ask a friend, promise me, won't tell anybody. So that's why I'm just a strong proponent of suicide prevention in our middle schools and high schools, to teach kids what to do to help themselves or a friend, and just to know that it's not their fault. It's not a character flaw. It's something very real, but most importantly, something that can be helped, that there is help and that there's hope, because in the darkness of whatever they're dealing with or going through, it's hard for them to see a way out.
I did a little research, and according to the CDC, America's suicide rate is rising. And now this was in 2016, so I can't even imagine what it is in 2018. But it says that in 2016, nearly 45,000, let me repeat this, 45,000 Americans aged, and this is what just hit me, 10 years or older died by suicide.
Mm-hmm.
If you can answer this question, why do you think this is happening? 10 years old. 10.
Yeah.
10.
Yep. Yeah, we are learning, our researchers are learning more and more about suicide too, that it's, even someone as young as a preschooler can start having thoughts. That's not the norm. But I think what's important, as you mentioned, the suicide rates are on a rise, or we know for kids 10 years and older up through adults, and that older adult male having the highest increase. So did you ask me why I thought it might be increasing?
Yes. Do you have any inclination as to why this is occurring?
That's $1 million question. I think a question that everybody's looking at. And I don't think we have any clear-cut answers, but we know that things are changing in our world. We are, I think there is more pressure and stress on all of us. We're a fast-paced world. We are getting more and more connected to our gadgets, the social media. We are, as a society, we are not getting the exercise that we used to get. We're not out working in the fields. We're not out on the street playing ball or having the neighborhood ball game like we used to do. We also know as other diseases, those top 10 diseases, whether it be cardiac disease, cancers, that almost all of them are dropping, except for Alzheimer's and suicide, are increasing. And when you look at our society and when you think of how many fundraisers you've been on in this past year and what did you fundraise for, I'm sure most of us supported cancer research or all different kinds of fundraisers. But in spite of suicide being the leading cause of death, and we'll say among our children, it is, and I asked this to a head of psychiatry here at Washington University in St. Louis, and I asked him, how much of our research budget goes to support research on early onset mood disorders? And he said, I can't tell you exactly, but I can tell you this. It is just a sliver of our national research budget. And we know that every day research dollars are getting tighter and tighter. And again, as a parent who worked in the pediatric hospital and really seen the value of research, and then I took my own journey with my own son with a mental illness, and it literally just brings tears to my eyes. And I think about why can't we as a society do more up front to try to prevent someone from losing a life to suicide. And research and talking about it, our society is so hung up that this thing is a character flaw and not a real illness that really merits serious concern. And consequently, many, many people like my son, because of the message that we say as a society, rather than reach out and say, I need help, I'm going to focus on trying to hide it and get by and hope that it goes away. And so often, it doesn't.
My goodness. So, Marion, earlier in the conversation, you mentioned that schools don't really provide much information and much help in mental illness. So what I just want to make sure I'm understanding you correctly. Do you think that schools should address the topic on suicide like they address other topics in maybe a health class?
Absolutely. That's a perfect place to slip in a class about mental health. And again, I think sometimes we get hung up as a society because we're all about pointing fingers way too much in our world and saying, oh, you have a mental illness, I don't, or you have this and I don't. I always tell the kids that, you know what, every one of us walking this earth, we are working toward improving our mental health. I have not met a person on this earth yet. I've talked to some pretty fine people that can say they have perfect mental health. So, yes, let's stop pointing fingers and let's look at what can we do to help our own mental health. What can we do to help others that have mental health? Because we're all in different places on that journey. So should we be talking about it in schools? Absolutely. It's critical. Again, looking at how many lives suicide is taking. And even adults who have a diagnosis or who don't have a diagnosis or who have died by suicide, most of them had warning signs when they were teenagers and it was missed. Or they didn't have the coping skills in place when they were younger, that maybe if they had better coping skills or had opportunities and to learn how can I be more resilient, maybe their outcomes would have been changed. So absolutely, I am a strong proponent. I know our organization does do suicide prevention in middle schools and high schools. And, Pam, it blows me away when we go in, and again, have a good program, have an evidence-based program, give the kids an opportunity to say, I need help. But again, they need to feel safe. They need to know, oh, my God, this is not my fault. I am not alone, and they need to know that there's help out there, that they can get help. When we go in and we use the SOS Signs of Suicide program, and consistently after that presentation, whether we're talking to middle schools or high schools, we will have about 12% of the kids will say, I need to talk to somebody. And we give them the opportunity if it's about themselves or a friend. So I think that's so important. Prevention. And the sooner we can get help to these kids, the better. And who sees our children more than we do as parents? Teachers.
Absolutely. So with that information being said, I hear a lot about middle and high school. So that brings the question, what about elementary school? I would love for some type of program to be put in place for elementary school age children because, like your son had expressed to you, this thought in third grade was on his mind. So I think that we feel like our children can't handle certain things, so it's too much for them. you know,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't think we're giving kids enough credit. And I don't think that we're giving them the benefit of the doubt because, see, it's nothing more important than being proactive. I get, so frustrated when people are reactive to things.
Yeah.
And, well, why can't we be proactive? So why can't you, come put together a program for grade school age kids, elementary school age kids, in first and second grade and third grade. I mean, you can talk to them about suicide on their level. It doesn't. You don't have to use all this extravagant verbiage or anything like that, but bring it down to their level. And
Right.
I'm here to tell you, Marion, I go on reading tours to various schools to first grade, second grade, third grade. These first and second graders have so much to say. I just often wonder if the parent realizes that this child has so much to say, there's so much in them. They're just, I can't express enough how parents and educators and professionals need to listen to these kids because they have so much to say. They just want somebody to hear them out.
Right, right. And I think a couple things that I know for us as an agency, we do go in and we work with elementary age children. We don't necessarily go in and do a suicide prevention program because researchers recommend not really doing a evidence-based suicide prevention program to a student that's younger than fifth grade. However, we know that those elementary years, preschool, kindergarten, K through 4, are some very, very formative years. And so we'll go and we'll get into the school and trying to get in front of those kids, talking about bullying prevention, talking about feelings, talking maybe about coping skills. So many of our schools now, I think there's a huge push talking about trauma, trying to recognize trauma when a child has been through a traumatic event, and how can we support that child that's had a trauma, whether it's been physical, mental, sexual abuse, bullying now being right up there with those other types of trauma, and really trying to get kids to acknowledge their feelings and that they're talking about those feelings and that they feel safe and it's not a shame and blame game.
Do you think that parents put too much pressure on their children now to succeed?
Yeah, I think a lot of parents do put pressure on their kids in various forms. I mean, we want our kids to be the best that they can be. And so two things I'd like to speak to that on that is that, yeah, we need to be mindful of what's really most important in our children's life is that they have a healthy well-being, they feel good about themselves, or is the most important thing that they get into that top-ranked university. And I think sometimes when our sight is set on what we want our children to achieve, maybe we want them to have a better life than what we had, or a life that's just as good, that we do put pressure on our kids. And like I mentioned earlier, I think we as a society live in a very stressful society. I think another thing that's important for this audience to hear is that sometimes our children, they do a pretty darn good job themselves without any other parental support, putting pressure on themselves. We know that kids that are gifted, whether they're academically gifted, or they're athletically gifted, or they're musically, or artists, or they have a special giftedness. We know that those kids are at a higher risk. And again, those are kids sometimes that is totally not on our radar because we think, hey man, They are good to go. They are golden. They're moving forward. But they have set that bar very, very high for themselves. They will strive for perfection. And anything that falls short, especially if there's some other things going on, such as depression in their minds, that if they're not perfect, that anything below that is total failure. And that's how they process that. Again, that's if they have a mental illness. They lose that ability to see the good. They can only see the bad. And the only thing that's getting through their brain is that one thing they didn't do perfect. That then becomes a little molehill that becomes a mountain. But again, so that in terms of people putting pressure upon themselves, and I can't tell you how many kids that we work with, too, that are talking about these incredible pressures their parents are putting on them. So, again, focusing on what's most important with our child. And it's so hard when kids are struggling for parents to set academics aside. Say, you know what? That's not the most important thing right now. Or maybe they're in a university, and there may be some of them are studying to be doctors. That at some point, people need to put that on pause while they focus on their own mental health. That always needs to be the most important. And sometimes we have to set aside what we thought was the most important thing to be successful in this world, being healthy and happy.
Right. So, as parents, we really have to put things into perspective. It's not about a child receiving all A's on a report card, or wanting to be athletic, or just whatever it is that you may personally feel that your child has to be. It's not about that. It's about the child's mental health and well-being. If your child is singing, or if your child dances around the house, or things like that, Marion, would you agree that perhaps that may be signs that a child is healthy and happy when they're singing or dancing, or just appearing to have a good time with him or herself?
Absolutely. I mean, those are very healthy signs. We want our children to be happy, and they need to be carefree. They need to just have fun. So celebrate those moments and encourage them. We all need our time to de-stress. We have to keep our stressors in balance from the time we leave our mother's womb till the day we die, trying to keep that balance, working on our social and emotional well-being. Huge.
So how would you explain the effects that a child that's committed suicide have on his or her friends? Because I know that has to affect the friend in some form or fashion.
Absolutely, and that's very important because I think a suicide and those around that person who knew that person is very, very unsettling. It's a very complicated grief. I think all of us ask ourselves the question of, what was my role in that suicide? What could I or should I have done differently? And again, thinking of a clear lake, a very calm lake, and someone throws a rock in that very calm lake, and that rock representing suicide. And imagining that lake, the rippling effects that rock had. The closer I am to that rock or to that suicide, the rougher my waters are going to be. However, even going far out to that rippling effect, it's a huge, suicide has a huge impact on even those on the far edges. And I think when we process that, kind of that, oh my gosh, the guilt, the shame and blame, that if we don't process that in the proper way, it can be very dangerous in terms of I get caught up in that I should have done something differently. And we always tell kids, and when there is a suicide in the school, and we want to come in with what we call postvention, how can we best support this community after a suicide? We're saying, who was the closest to the student? Who were the teachers that was closest to the student? And let's work with them first, and let's process it with them. Let's talk about it, because we don't want it to be a negative spiraling effect. And especially children, very complicated. It's complicated for an adult to try to figure it out, but especially for a child. That they, I encourage people to talk to someone, whether it's a therapist or your pastor, or someone who understands grief or who understands the magnitude of this. Have someone work with you to help you process it in a healthy way. And we also get concerned about, when there's a suicide, about the contagion. That, again, people might see it as that their pain is over and it's a good thing. Again, if we don't process, if we don't handle that suicide correctly, if the media, again, what happened with Kate Spade, it's, we get concerned that it's out in the media and other people might see it as a good solution. And I can tell you that suicide is never, ever the answer. That there's always other ways to deal with whatever they're trying to deal with. And suicide's never the answer.
Right. I post on my Facebook page for my, friends and family and those who may come upon the page that it's nothing is, that's so horrific or horrendous in your life that you can't recover from it,
Right.
because you are loved, and you are special. You're custom made, and you have a purpose here in this life. And if you make the decision that you want to end your life, then you're taking something precious away from the world, because only you have that gift to give to the world. And, I just can't say it enough. And when I go to the reading, on the reading tours with the kids, I tell them that all the time. Only you have your gift to give to the world, and that you are special. You're custom made, and it's only one of you. There's no one like you. Even if you have a twin or two, you are still your own individual. So it's such a hard topic to talk about, but yet it needs to be talked about. And I want to do my part for my listeners to provide them with some answers, with some resources, and, hopefully someone may be listening today that we can save a life, make a difference, that, again, you are loved and you are special. And please find the strength to seek help if you have these thoughts of suicide. So, Marion, what can parents do to help their children prepare for the memorial service of their friend that's committed suicide or someone that they know?
I think it's important that you talk about what had happened, and again, that message that suicide is never the answer, and that we don't really know what happened or what went wrong, but as difficult as their death is, and it is for anyone who's lost someone close to them to suicide, it's a grief beyond words. And to acknowledge how painful it is and that loss. I think it's also important for them to think about, we can't get them back. But what can you do in their memory to try to help someone else? Whether that be you're going to do a walk in memory of them. You are going to volunteer for an agency, or even say they were an animal lover, and you want to honor their life in memory of them. Volunteer and do something in memory of them. You want to keep their spirit alive. I'm a strong proponent of keeping their spirit alive. Who were they, and what can you do to keep the presence here? Do something positive with that pain. And if they are getting stuck in that grief and they can't get out of it, to talk to someone, talk to a professional. It's okay. It's okay. I always like to think of our professionals as coaches, a life coach, that all of us can benefit by working with a life coach. And when you lose someone close to you to suicide, and you're really struggling with it, go talk to someone. Help them, or get some help processing it. I even know myself that I learned at one of my son's friends that after my son had died, that he tried to take his life. Because again, he took on the shame and blame. Oh my gosh, I was a good friend. I should have been able to help him. I failed him. And again, realizing, where are these people coming from that take their life? That's a decision they made. So I remember he said, he encouraged everyone to talk to someone about getting help processing that death. It's too easy to go down the wrong road. And we don't want people going down that wrong road.
Absolutely. It's very important that you understand that it is no shame. There is no shame involved in this. It's the stigma has to be removed from mental health issues. The stigma has to be removed, because if people feel like they're going to be talked about, or it's something that's shameful, they're not going to reach out to somebody. Well, it's okay. It's okay to reach out and talk to someone if you're having a bad day, or you're getting these various thoughts or whatnot. It's okay, right, Marion? It's okay.
That's right, and also I think it's so important that we as parents or loved ones or friends, that if we have someone say, you know what, you don't understand what I'm going through, how bad my life is, that they're right. I don't understand, but I care about you. And if I can't understand how you got here or where you got here, that's okay. But what I do know, that we can help you, or someone can help you get through this. And it may not be me as your mother, your grandma, or your teacher, but there are people out there that are trained to help people, because what you are dealing with is real. It's very real. Because I think, again, too often we want to minimize it. Oh, no, it can't be that bad.
It cannot be minimized. It cannot
that's right.
be.
Because in their mind it is, and it is very, very serious, and it needs to be taken very seriously. So affirm and confirm that they're feelings. And this is also a good time for us to sit back and listen, trying to just really listen rather than let me tell you what to do. I want to listen to you. I want to know why you're hurting. And I want to know what I need to do to help. And I'm going to try to help. And again,
so parents, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Marion.
I was going everyone needs to know what our limits are. And that's why, what should parents do? You asked me earlier if they're worried about their child. Know that maybe this is beyond you as a parent, a loving parent. And again, because of, that child may feel more comfortable revealing their most darkest secret to someone else, maybe not mom and dad. Get them to a professional to get help.
Please do. Please do. And also, I just have to reiterate once more to also observe and listen to your children. Watch them. You can see when your child is not the norm. Marion said earlier, there are signs. So as a parent, you can't get so caught up in parents. Believe me, I know I'm a parent. Life can get so chaotic sometimes, and you can get so caught up being busy. You're trying to keep a roof over your head. You're trying to, feed your kids. You're trying to clothe your kids. And, we can get tired and exhausted. But please just always find the time to listen to your kids. And in the midst of doing all the things that we have to do as parents, just watch your kids too. Just take time to watch your kids to see if behaviors have been changing or, have changed or, just the signs are there. Marion, could you just, reiterate those signs again for parents?
Absolutely. And again, as we talk about these warning signs, you might think, oh my gosh, that's pretty typical. What teenager doesn't do those kind of things? But ask yourself, is your child having a cluster of these symptoms, 4 or 5, and are they stuck? They just can't get over it. So is it lasting longer than 2 weeks and they're having a cluster? Number 1 on the list for kids is anger, irritability, and rage. And we often don't think of that as depression, but for youth it often comes out in anger. It can be, like adults, it can be sadness. It can be I'm crying a lot. It can change my sleeping patterns, eating too much or too little. Change in weight. Again, eating too much or eating too little. I lose interest in things I used to love to do. Maybe I used to love to play ball, and I don't even want to do that anymore. I start to withdraw. I withdraw from my family and friends. And again, for adolescents, it's normal they start pulling away from mom and dad. It's not normal when they start pulling away from their friends. Do they have feelings of worthlessness, or they seem to be feeling guilty, hopelessness? That affects my ability to think. I can't think as clearly or as quickly. Maybe my grades might start dropping. I might even start thinking about death or suicide. I might become anxious. A lot of kids, warning sign is that they just become very anxious. I might turn to illegal drugs or alcohol, again, as an unhealthy coping. I might start other unhealthy coping, self-injury, forms of self-injury. Maybe I just stop taking care of myself. I don't care how I look anymore. I just don't take care of my physical health. Those, for the most part, are some of the more common warning signs of depression. And again, knowing that no one's depression looks the same, that we all have a different environment. We have different genes. Our lives are different. But those are some of the warning signs. I really want parents to know about that anger, irritability, and rage in kids.
And let's not just totally throw out the window the fact that, Marion is speaking on drugs and alcohol because, and I know some listeners may say, this is Itsy Bitsy Bookworms Radio, we're talking about the kids. Well, yes, we are talking about the kids, and it's not unheard of. It may not be often, but it's not unheard of for a third, fourth, or fifth grader to have experience and exposure with drugs or alcohol. Am I
Sadly, that's
correct, Mary?
true. That is true. And I talk to teachers, and when are you seeing these behaviors? And it's getting earlier and earlier. It, times are different now than when you and I grew up, Pam. And there's so many, and that's, I think, another reason that's driving our suicide rates. The access to illegal drugs. It's easy, and they can be cheap, and I can get addicted so quickly. Even firearms, as we all in our country, we have the right to carry a weapon. We know that more people are dying from suicide than homicides. Or if there is a gun in my home, chances are that gun will be used much for suicide versus keeping me safe. So we have to be so careful about this means, whether it be drugs and alcohol or access to guns and weapons.
Absolutely. So don't think for a minute. We, as parents, want to believe that our kids are ideal and that they're perfect. But in reality, they're human beings, just like anybody else. And, we have our upsides, and then, we have our downsides. So don't think for a minute that, hey, your child may not be, interested in drugs or even using drugs or interested in alcohol or using alcohol at a younger age. So that's so important to take away. One of the things today, it's just so many takeaways from today, but that's an important one to just make sure that you keep an eye on that, because, none of us, it's just by the grace of God that we all make it through, the ones that make it through, because it's difficult for everybody. And oh my gosh, we're getting so close to 4 o'clock now. It's actually 3:57. So Miriam, before we have to sign off, if you would, is there a hotline for parents?
Yes,
For adults, is there a hotline for kids? Can you please share that information?
Yes, there is the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline or hotline is 1-800-273-TALK or 8255. That's 1-800-273-8255. And find out, every community has a hotline. Find out what mental health agencies are in your community. I know in St. Louis we have the Children's Service Fund or Children's Coalition. Get on the website and look for resources in your community. And calling those hotlines is a great way to start to get connected to services. In St. Louis, we have CHADS. Our number's 314-952-8274. But there's always people out there that are wanting and waiting to help people who are struggling.
Marian, thank you so much for being the guest today. I hope that we have answered some questions that parents may have, and I hope that if there is anyone who may have been listening in today, a parent listening in that may have been contemplating suicide, I hope with all my heart that we have encouraged you not to take action, and that there is help, and there's no shame, and there's no stigma attached to getting help. So I'd just like to leave with this. Every successful person has a painful story. Every painful story has a successful ending, but you have to be here. You have to be here. You have to be present in order to achieve that successful ending. And I also like to just quickly read Psalms chapter 30, verse 5. Weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning. I would like to give a big shout out and thank you to all of my listeners today. And I'd like for you to tune in for more information I'm sure that you can use. Make uplifting your children a part of your daily routine. If you'd like to be on Itsy Bitsy Bookworms Radio, please email itsybitsybookworms.2016@yahoo.com. And please tell a friend to tell a friend about Itsy Bitsy Bookworms Radio. Remember to have a lovely day. Peace and love, everybody. Thank you.